So yeah, we're going to start from scratch because the previous webinar link got broken. So we're going to start from scratch so that for posterity. So the idea behind this webinar is Startup 101, what it takes to start up. And in my opinion, there are 4 different factors that contribute to a startup, 4 different thought processes that come when you're actually making a startup, which is philosophy, concepts, technology, and how to pivot it all and translate that into success. And when we are talking about philosophy, uh, these are the 4 people that I kind of follow when it comes to philosophy. These are people who have quite literally changed my thought processes. It would be great. You can Google them up. You should read about all 4 of them. Steve Jobs is a no-brainer. The guy who made Apple, the world's first venture-funded startup. That was Steve Jobs. That was what Apple was. Paul Graham, the guy behind Y Combinator, one of the first successful startup web accelerators. Then we've got Steve Blanks, the brain behind the lean startup methodology. He's actually a professor at Berkeley, and he's the brain behind the lean startup methodology. And Guy Kawasaki, who happens to be the world's first product evangelist. He was Apple's evangelist way back in the 80s. So these are the 4 guys who literally wrote the book, different parts of the same book actually, on how to run a startup, which we kind of all follow today in terms of base philosophy. And if you look at Guy Kawasaki, he talks about the concept of what a startup is. A startup has to be a disruption, a technological disruption. It has to change ways. It has to literally make something which is very complex to do today and make it very simple. Startup is not about making money. It's not just a business. It's not just about income, because there are other ways of making income come. You can start a consultancy company and make income. You can own a shop and make income. Literally, what you can do is you can take a current business model, a restaurant, open it. It's still not a startup. A startup has to change something, has to bring something extremely new to the table. It should not be only about money. It need not be money for a few years, in fact, but it should quite literally change the way something is done today. I can give you examples of what he's trying to imply. Apple changed the way graphical user interfaces came to the screen. If you look at Casio invented calculators, so they were a startup at one point of time. You look at Toyota or Hondas were startups way back in the 50s when people were trying to build cheap cars from scratch, and the Japanese came up with this superb way of doing so. So then we come to the lean startup methodology. We come to Steve Blank, who comes up with a way to make startups successful. He comes up with at the end of the day, you need to make money. I mean, it's great. You brought some great concept into the world, but you need to eat. So he comes up with this lean startup methodology, which kind of translates what he calls is the process of selling, to make people come buy your product. What it takes to actually bring in the moolah. He writes a book, and this is a book that everybody should read. Everybody who's trying to start up should read. It's called the 4 Steps to Effinity, and he talks about the startup sales model, how to keep reiterating your product idea into an actual business, into an actual money-making machine. He talks about several things, including how cash cows kind of kill businesses. Microsoft is a classic example where Windows is a cash cow, and they take too long to actually change themselves and to go in new directions. Whereas Apple is not that kind of a company. Apple is perfectly comfortable killing iPods or older versions of iPads, or prefer cutting support to older instruments. So he talks about how keeping yourself lean will keep you ahead of the curve, and how to reiterate yourself fast enough. So that's the lean startup methodology that Steve Blank brings to the table. Then you've got the hacker culture by Paul Graham. And he believes that people who actually face problems are in the best position to solve the problems. For example, if you are deeply affected by, say, sharing of files, so you should build a product that shares the file based on your use cases. So he feels that use cases come from people with the problems, and if they have the ability to solve their own problems, then they are probably in the most likely place to actually fix the problem. So there are several examples. Dropbox is one of them. Discuss is one of them. All these are Paul Graham companies. They're all Y Combinator companies. You see them in the world all around you. There are Airbnb is one of them. These are all Paul Graham companies that have literally solved some of the most breathtaking problems. Dropbox, before Dropbox came along, file syncing was a nightmare. Before Airbnb came along, hotels used to charge you a lot of money, and you had no way of, if you had your own house and you wanted to rent it out, just your room or something, you had no way of doing it through a structured manner. Airbnb brought that to the forefront. And Discuss literally rewrote the whole commenting section on websites. You find Discuss commenting threads everywhere, and they're the best. Best way to integrate commenting into your own website. So that's Discuss. There's several Paul Graham companies that you guys should read about or follow. And Steve Jobs, who comes up with this wonderful notion that the customer is clueless. And if you listen to the customer, you're not going to make anything useful. And he gives a classic example saying that Ford, if Henry Ford heard out customers, he would have had to build a faster carriage. But he didn't listen to the customer. He figured out that he needed to build a car, a motorized engine. And that's what the customer needed. It was a new idea, it was a new concept. The customer didn't know that until he actually saw the car. And that's a very powerful idea. The customer need not always know what he wants, and he won't even find it useful unless he uses it for the first time. So these are broadly the 4 different philosophies that you must keep in mind when you are trying to pivot for a startup. Going to the next stage of startup building. So one of the fundamental ways of building startups is the lean startup philosophy. Not a lot of people agree with this. For example, if you look at the guys from Apple, they would tell you not to follow the lean startup methodology because they can afford to, because they have the money, they have the clout, they can afford to not follow the lean startup methodology. Whereas most of us can't, right? Most of us are individual people or small groups of people, and we don't want to waste too much time and energy building something elaborate. We want to test it. We want to see whether people will buy it, and we want to see whether our idea is useful. We want to come back to the drawing board, and we want to quickly see whether everything makes sense. And that's what the lean startup methodology teaches us. It first teaches us to build a minimum viable product, put up different versions of it online all at once, test it using A/B testing, which is basically you present certain users with option A, certain users with option B, and see which one gets more traction. Put all that traction into metrics and choose which side you want to take. I mean, obviously metrics will tell you how to take your product forward, whether people are even using it. Repivot, go back to the drawing board, see which direction you want to head, and that's called pivot. Prioritize which features you want to do, loop the whole thing from the back forth. And that's how you build. Most startups are built this way. Most successful startups go through rapid iteration cycles to get this done. There are a lot more points here. For example, he talks about continuous integration and talks about how the prioritization and A/B testing can actually be replaced by sales cycle, for example. So this is not written in stone. This is just the baseline philosophy of how you build a startup from scratch forth. And another concept to keep in mind is, what are you building? Are you building something mission critical? For example, if you're building something to do with banking, you cannot literally play around too much with your technology stack. I mean, money is involved, and if people lose money, they're going to be very angry with you. And email, you can't afford to miss emails. You can't afford to bungle up business processing. You're going to have angry customers. Whereas you have permissibly tolerant systems. For example, if you don't get your friend's Facebook status message, it's okay. I mean, you're not going to lose everything. So these are permissibly tolerant systems. Games, it's perfectly fine if your game crashes and you quit. I mean, it's okay. For example, if you search and you don't find the search result and it takes a few days for it to index, that's also perfectly fine. It's not mission critical in the true sense that it is. So depending on these factors as to what is mission critical, what is permissibly tolerant, what is tolerant within your own infrastructure, but what is not, you have to make these key decisions when you're actually trying to structure your. I'm talking to computer science graduates here, so I'm going to go ahead with only about how to build computer science startups, but not something else. I mean, there are way too other many kind of startups like aeronautical startups and things, but we're not focusing on those things right now. So all of this comes down to technology, and it depends on, hold on, sorry. So all of this comes down and boils down to the technology that you want to use, and like I said, it depends on what I just spoke about. Your technology largely depends upon your scale of operation, what is mission critical, what is not, what is permissible, what can you tolerate, what kind of performance can you tolerate, what kind of lag can you have. These kind of things broadly determine what kind of technology you're going to use to build your startup. You have, depends if you want to start up small. If you want to start up small, like you want to just put a website up and you want to get a basic service out, you would go for a cloud. But if you're an IBM, you have internal people, you have security reasons, then you would go for internal servers. If you're using the cloud, depending on what kind of technology stack you want to build on, you will go for there are 3 different varieties. I'm not going to get into the details here. Again, UX, it depends on what you're building. If you're building a website which has static content, you would go for content management systems. You would go for CDN systems, whereas if you're trying to build a rich internet application, you would try the Adobe Flex. You would try, if you're building, for example, even in the UX, you can build mobile apps, in which case you would try divergent technologies like PhoneGap or whatever it is. So it depends largely on this, and your database is a very key important factor. If you're using transactions, for example, you need like wide-ranging transactions, and they need to be atomic. So you need ACID compliant, like banks need ACID compliance. You would go for transactional databases. NoSQL databases, on the other hand, give you the flexibility of choosing an intermediate. For example, you can have a highly available database versus a highly transactional databases. You have like various shades of grays, and there are about 150 types of NoSQL systems available. The famous ones being MongoDB, Cassandra, CouchDB, Google Data Store, Amazon's Data Store. So you have a lot of variety here to choose from, and all of this, let me remind you, completely depends upon what you're trying to build. What is it that you're trying to achieve with your product idea? And then at the end of the day, you also have to do a lot of analysis, and analysis is not possible on your database. You must have heard of data warehousing, where you take an ETL service, transfer everything, but those are old days. I mean, people don't do that anymore. People have big data, have traditional OLAP, going through traditional ETL services. They have BigQuery, they have Hadoop, they have Hive, they have a whole lot of systems that are currently available to enable them to solve these problems. So therefore, success is a combination of the right technology, a useful product idea, and the cloud to sell. But here's where you will hit a dead end, because not all of us have the cloud to sell, and selling is the most important part. Like I was explaining when I was explaining about what Steve Blank said. He said that unless you have the ability to sell and get the feedback into your system, into a loop, there is nothing that really goes on. So the cloud to sell is not something all of us have. Not all of us have the right contacts. Not all of us have the right ideas. I mean, considering we're just out of college, not all of us have the right judgment calls. So there are ways in which you build this cloud. And the rest of my presentation deals with how do you build cloud. So cloud comes in 4 different forms. You have infrastructure, you have marketing, you have hiring, and you have selling. And all of these are critical components to any startup. Infrastructure is very hard. If you're starting up, the first thing you will look for is a new office. And offices are expensive. You can't afford to pay 20,000 rupees a month on office space just coming out of college. You have incubators to help you, you have accelerators to help you, you have organizations to help you. It's deeply useful to look into some of these organizations. Marketing, getting people to know to use your product is extremely hard. People don't have the time, don't have the mind space. You have to keep hitting them back and you have to keep branding yourself. So there are different ways of doing it. And one of my personal favorite is referral. Give people discounts to referring your product. Classic example, Uber. We gave you deep discounts to make sure that you referred your friend. So there are growth hacking ways possible. I would recommend all of you to follow growth hacking on Twitter and kind of read all their articles. It's extremely informative on how to build a market for yourself without having to spend too much money, because you can't afford to spend too much money. And remember, a startup is all about conserving resources because you have only so much resources. Startup is not about having the best technology. It's not about having the best people. It's about making do with what you have at the moment, and making sure that it comes into something successful. Hiring. Nobody wants to join your startup. People want to join Microsoft, Google. They will work for the best salary they can get. So you've got to convince people to join you. And how do you do that? It can be through several processes. You can give them equity. You can give them shares. You can give them so many other ways of getting people to join you in your mission, because a startup is a mission. It's not something that's already making money. It's not something that's already ongoing. It's about a mission, and that's very important. And selling is extremely hard. How do you sell? So, for example, when we started the Score, we used to sell by piggybacking. What I'm trying to tell you is, we used to go to very good brands like Mercedes-Benz and Honda and tell them that for each customer that buys your car, please give them a complimentary magazine. That's piggybacking. So you can use that piggybacking to go and sell advertisements somewhere else. I'm just giving you an example. Marketplaces. For example, Apple Store is the best way to generate revenue. The easiest way to generate revenue is to put up an app and you will get instant money. If your app is good, people are going to buy it. And Apple is going to automatically recommend you to the top based on ratings. So piggybacking is very important with regard to how to pivot yourself with your startup. When also talking about marketing, you have a lot of media houses that support startup. Yourstartup.in is a great example. Also, I would recommend, if you can get yourself out there, Read Write Web, TechCrunch are all US-based companies, Verge.com. There are all several media companies that really have an important mind space in the US ecosystem for startups. If you get yourself represented there, you're sorted. Your startup can go places. So where should your startup idea come from? There are 6 different places which are my personal favorite. Social e-governance. This is where everybody is investing their time in. The next social network. People are talking about change.org is my favorite example here. That's why it's right on top. Change.org lets you create campaigns that kind of makes real change possible. Twitter is my next favorite because Twitter quite literally democratized the elections in India, or also democratizing revolutions in other part of the world. It's quite literally making information free-flowing and real-time. Discuss is also a very good example. It kind of literally opened up commenting systems without the need for content management systems on the internet, and it really solved a problem which a lot of people had. Snapchat has just come up. People like using it. It's not something I use, but I thought that this is where the web is going, so I thought I'll put it there. We have payment systems, incredible companies making new payment ideas, Stripe, Paytm, several of them. There are also offline payment companies that have done really well, like new credit card machines that are coming up. You have the Square, you have the Apple Pay. So many companies investing in payment right now. It's a good place to look into. Analytics. We have an Indian company, Zoho, which I'm sure all of you know. There are also several other analytics companies that kind of combine data mining with analytics, like Qbol, BigQuery, and there are open source solutions like Hadoop and Hive, which you can all look into. The next is media, and media is also very important because you have companies like Issue, SlideShare. SlideShare was built in Delhi. Then you have companies like Tumblr. You have different blog systems that are coming up every day. And this is also a big open space because everybody wants a share of the market. Everybody wants content to be on their system because it generates advertisement revenue for them. And utility-based companies like Zomato, where you can kind of find out the cheapest place to eat, or Practo, find the doctor next to your house, or things like that. Utility-based companies, dating sites also come here, and even your matrimony sites all come under utility-based companies. So you're solving a specific utility that already exists in the real world, except that you're taking it away and making it something more specific. Commonfloor.com, Suleika.com, all of these come under utility companies. So you can find yourself there. E-commerce, Flipkart, Snapdeal, Amazon.com, name it. They're all coming under e-commerce. You can come up with your own e-commerce idea, but remember, it has to solve a specific problem. Snapdeal had a key focus on extra inventory. Flipkart had a key focus on buying books online because they figured that people don't want to go to bookstores. Myntra.com built its entire idea that people could return clothes whenever they wanted. And the same idea was copied by Fab Furnish and all these other furniture guys. So you must have a key goal that has and go with that and run with that. Education, big market that's opening up. We have Treehouse, which is a new company that deals with videos on how to learn iPhone programming. Khan Academy, my personal favorite, teaches you almost just about everything. My own company, Optimize HRT, focuses on commercial training in large corporations, and we are also in the education space. And the one that I did not have space for was advertisements. And advertisements is a big market. Serving advertisements is a big market. You have Google Ads, InMobi, all of these guys doing several things in how to serve the biggest advertisement network. So that's pretty much it. And if you have any doubts, this is my email address, and you can write to me and ask me any questions. And I'm going to open up the mic. Tarun, if you can come up online, that'll be nice.
Yeah, Ajay.
So yeah, that's pretty much the Startup 101. And if you have any doubts, or if anybody else,
they have a question answer option. Nobody has posted questions yet. People, if you have any questions, please do ask Ajay now.
Okay, because I can't read the questions, you have to come and take it up.
Okay, nobody has posted questions. No.
Okay, so I can go ahead and email this presentation to you guys if you want, and
yeah,
and if anybody has any questions, you can always have them email to me.
Yeah, okay. I'll give you this. I'll give them this ID, Ajay at Hycode.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for the talk, Ajay.
You guys are welcome.
So thank you everyone for watching this webinar. We'll be back with more soon.